야, 저랑서다 루주. 그냥 사물이야. 아니.
So you, to all the students, I give my special greetings. Usually I refer to the 20th century January, 20th century and the generation of 21st century.
Now you are the generation of 21st century. So, naturally, past is past. 자주 인식 구그루 봐. 구두에. So past is past. No way to change. Future not yet come. There is a real possibility to change future. Not necessarily is it just repeat. The sort of past experience just to repeat that, not necessary. We can change. So, the main responsibility to create a better future is you, the generation of the 21st century. So, we all hoping you should think about the future and keep in your mind, it is possible to change better future. The 20th century, a lot of killing, as I mentioned this morning also. More than 200 people killed through violence. 200 million of people killed in past century. If you see, such sort of violence really change world, become better, and then we can justify immense violence. But that's not the case. The result of these violence, simply suffering, immense suffering. Not only the particular sort of generation or particular army or these people, but their families, immense suffering. So now we should think, we should have sort of say, clear vision. This century, 21st century, should be century of peace, peaceful century. Clear. So we can create peaceful century because war created by human being, violence created by human being ourselves. So if we develop certain sort of determination with vision, then we can change. His
Holiness is asking to translate for the general public, Ladakis.
Oh yeah. Jasagata. Oh, therefore, while you carry study, you yourself educating, carry education, you should have sincere motivation. The aim, goal of your education, firstly, your own well-being, of course. Then you should not forget about humanity, about world. You are part of 7 billion human beings. So the entire 7 billion human beings have the responsibility to create happier 7 billion human beings. So,
tene skondone tebu songa zadara tene kyujaran lobjong chotana te sambabo kurgo sano tene maos tene kyujaran chiche lobjong chotane tene objective chi to sambo kosan tene na sambo ko chiche ko kyujaran rara mise chipe oncha jara oncha ispago chetena jitene na tene mima koshi yocha tene mim sante samba kulte tene la panto se tene sambaji kulte kyujaran lobjong chogo shato tene te ma katani moso
yeah.
Now next we have the question and answer session.
Yeah.
So, in order to attain the first level of the path of accumulation, the path of accumulation, which is called the small path of accumulation, how much merit does one need to amass? So this is regarding the Mahayana path of accumulation. So with regards to the Mahayana path of accumulation, the small, medium, and big, so this distinction or division into these three is only done within the context of the Mahayana path of accumulation. And as I said this morning, first one cultivates and develops great compassion and have the determination to help all sentient beings across the expanse of space. And then that in turn gives the impetus for you to wish and aspire to the full enlightenment or Buddhahood. And when this determination comes to the point of fruition, where you have a genuine bodhicitta within yourself, that's the moment when you enter the path of accumulation of the Mahayana. So I'm not sure how much merit one has to accumulate. I don't remember clearly. But once you have accumulated, once you have developed the path of accumulation within yourself, then next is you develop the path of application or preparation, which is the path where you have the experience of emptiness through the meditative power. And then after that you progress or further go on to the path of seeing when you see emptiness directly, and then after that you develop the path of meditation, and then the resultant Buddhahood at the end. So with regard to the Mahayana path of accumulation, those who are of the practitioner of Mahayana tradition, or who are of dull faculty, will not be able to, will not have or developed or cultivated the path of the understanding of emptiness before they enter the path of accumulation. So she researched a verse from Bodhisattva Charyavatara, 6th chapter, where it says that the merit that you have collected over 1,000 eons is destroyed by an instant of anger. And her question is, so with regard to that verse saying the 1,000 eon merit collected over 1,000 eon is destroyed by an instant of anger, refers to a bodhisattva who is lower to another bodhisattva in experience of bodhicitta and so forth. When such a bodhisattva becomes angry at the higher one, then that instant anger will destroy, it says, destroy the merit collected over 1,000 eons. But for someone who is higher in his or her experience, a bodhisattva here, when they have some kind of a negative emotion like that, then that's not so grave as the previous one. So here it is mentioned that they will destroy merits that is collected over 100 eons is destroyed. So there are differences in degrees of the intensity of the anger, the power of the anger, destructive power. So this the difference is made by the understanding of emptiness, insight into emptiness. When you have a very strong understanding of emptiness, where you are able to confirm that nothing has any objective existence, where the action, the actor, and the acted upon have no inherent existence, and that may help not to have that kind of anger as well. Do you know the story of Geshe Potowa? One of the Kadam masters, one of the three brothers of Kadam tradition. He was, in reality, a bodhisattva. One time, when he was actually compiling or making a catalog of the scriptures in a temple, and he was very seriously working on the cataloging of text, and then someone came to the temple and asked for a teaching, and Potowa got angry, and he shooed away the person, drove away the person.
Every daily life, I try to follow the precept, 5 precepts. So it's very not so difficult if a student can follow. All students can follow. It's very important in modern life. We're 21st century and we are the Buddhists. So it's very important to follow those things. What you want to say that's about the precepts, it's follow for all students at the basic or kindergarten to that can manipulate it into their school and college life. Every institutions we can say this followed for every student. Thank you.
다 개인기 러버 나사티. 개인기 러버 나사테 다 가다 메기 주분 그 추준단 저어요래.
So this is related to avoiding the 10 non-virtuous actions, comprising those of the 3 of body, 4 of speech, and 3 of mind. So these 10 non-virtuous actions, regarding them, perhaps the last one, which is wrong view, may be interpreted according to one's own religious tradition, but the rest of the 9 others are more or less common to all the religious traditions. So not killing even as an insect, and then not stealing others' possessions and properties, and then not committing sexual misconduct. So of course, couples also may not do any sexual misconduct. And then there are the 4 of speech, telling lies, harsh words, divisive talk, and then idle gossip. So these can be practiced by any religious follower of any religion. And then covetousness and malicious thoughts also can be avoided by any follower of any religion. So a wrong view may be understood according to one's own religious tradition. So with regard to the 5 precepts that you were referring, they are not killing human beings, not stealing, and then not telling a grave kind of lie. This you students may, or the common people may not be at risk of committing this kind of lie, but people like me and lamas who sit on some throne and give teachings to others may be prone to this, have the risk of telling this kind of lie. And then, of course, sexual misconduct, and then not taking alcohol. So there are what is meant by gross or coarse impermanence and subtle impermanence. So according to Vibhashika, according to Abhidhammakosha, Vibhashikas actually define objects as that taking birth or arising, then abiding, and then getting destroyed or disintegrating, and then decaying, and then finally disintegrating. So this is coarse understanding of impermanence. So if you talk about our life, we come into a life, and then we go through this decay, and then finally we die. And then the subtle impermanence is the impermanence which is defined by Sautrantika philosophical school upwards. So according to Pramanavartika by Dharmakirti, which mainly follows the system of Sautrantika school, says that something getting destroyed or a disintegration of something happens not because of some third cause, but the very cause which brings it about causes its disintegration. And so there's no sooner something comes into being, that very thing undergoes destruction or disintegration. And so that is the subtle understanding of impermanence. In other words, as soon as something arises or comes into being, it also gets disintegrated. So arisal and disintegration happens at the same time. So if you think along these lines, the fact that something decays shows that there is change happening. So if we look at change in a year, it has to happen every month. That change in a year and change that happens in a month must happen each day. And change in a day, like a flower in a flower, must happen in 24 hours, every hour. And so every second, every moment, things change, moment by moment. And so there's no third cause or third factor which causes that change and disintegration. And therefore, the very cause which brings about something is the cause for its disintegration. And so,
I myself saw through big machine. See, look,
microscope.
the particle, the atom level, furthermore, walk like that, further, deeper. You see, we can see momentarily changing, always moving. So that concept now, as I mentioned earlier,
so scientifically, by using these instruments, microscopes and so forth, we can see how things change moment by moment at the subatomic particle level. And this is something which is an empirical experience through science, modern science, that things change moment by moment. So according to science, the universe has come about through Big Bang. And how does Buddhism explain this?
That concept, I think, according to Abhidharma or Buddhist cosmology, so So there is no beginning of
the universe.
The world existence, no beginning. But you see, period, is it one we call
So this morning I referred to a world system, evolution, and then there is a period, a phase when the world system remains, and then destruction happens. Then we also talk about past and future lives. So regarding the external world, the environment, and the living beings living in it, we are composed of the four elements. And then, in addition to these four, there is the element of space. And then, for sentient beings, there is still an extra element of consciousness. And so science, modern science, talks about one Big Bang that has happened. So it's something for them, of course, to a Big Bang that may have happened prior to that one is still obscure, unknown. So Big Bang happened because of a very strong, powerful energy, and this energy has come from the subtle particles that has made the thing, and then they must have come from a previous universe. So from subtle elements, beginning with the space element, and then the wind, then fire, water, and then earth element are formed. And then when the universe gets destroyed, there's dissolution of these elements from the earth down to the space element. And so this cycle is repeated. Big Bang, Big Bang, Big Bang, Big Bang. So perhaps from the Buddhist point of view, the point of view of Buddhist cosmology or evolution theory, when at the time of the formation of the fire element, which happens because of the wind element creating the fire through its movement, and therefore perhaps the Big Bang may have happened. And then after the fire element becomes the water element, and then this earth element. And so with regards, so this is how the universe evolves from the space elements up to this earth element, and then how it dissolves from the element down to the space element. And space element, with regard to space element, there are the outer and inner space elements. So I may say that perhaps Big Bang happened when the heat element, the fire element, was being formed through the movement of the turbulence of the wind element.
Microscope kote ya instrument kote thongju metan bijaste to kodi ke computer te chara saraka lekin naten nanke zona tene scalpes kompa chapes ka stone scalpa tene snaps scalpa chapes scalpa se te tu va chilio chara sa tene to ta ko chi se chara tene nyam to tene goma drukana tene nakas tompena namke duluja tevelas tente tene namkana tene umske tene meske tene zumske sachu melu tizuga tsila dupeti tene duluja awan metkan jursana sachu tenchu meten melo namka timzete kilowa jiten chapsum nam mekan chapsum tizuga shade chafa Tangatang jiten elkane senjan dupchas kola sachu me lung namkaze teshma tene senjan dupchas te ka namshe te tuknan go te kya te tuk zona nam yako tene mata senjan dure kya sa ta khong ne nojin chona khong to kasto jute kya sa big bang chichik ne ne kya hana ne kya zana hana go hana go kan jete spiritual ne kya sa Matana Chetana, Chicken Hanga Stone, Tenemuska, Tene Yamcha, Tene Yam Jigzakan Esperanza, the Chaos. Our community to some Sana, Nakas Pompa, Tena Chetan, do the crunch, to the Chetano, testimonial Pomio, Numbo Shante issues, Chiazua, Mako Kortan Bijate, Tola Totski, and Yampo, Tene to Yaskap Zerkane, Nastamu to Chia, Shana, the Chan also. Sombasa big bang loketena chunjik mata setul basa sapike usu toko tosi inta tosi so
You are not a student. As you advise, Your Holiness, I read the 37 practices of the Bodhisattvas. Verse number 30 says, so I don't understand, he says, the line in verse number 30 which says, along with skillful means cultivate wisdom, which does not conceive the three fears as real. So what does that mean? Could you explain? Because I don't understand it. So the three spheres refers to the action, the actor, and the acted upon. The action, actor, and the object acted upon. And these three can be referred to with regard to anything, like giving and so forth. So of course, the three exist. But if you analyze where the actor is, without the action, you cannot talk about an actor, and without an action, without an actor, there's no actor. Without an actor, there cannot be an object acted upon, and without the object, there's no actor in action as well. And so these three are interdependent, as it is mentioned in the Mula Madhyamaka Karika. So although the three spheres, the action, the agent, and the acted upon exist, but if you try to analyze, try to search for them in themselves, you'll not be able to find anything independently. And then, of course, when you check, analyze, do the analysis into the causes. A cause cannot give rise to its effect without any dependence on other factors, and then similarly you cannot have a fruit without cause, and so forth.
Charlie Chananipo, Chava Sana Tuame, Chepapuji, Tengo, Koran, and the Chava Yudanipo, Chokan Yotosano, Chava can Chepapo Yodna, Sosi Yudon Yotosano, Sakisano Totani, Tuame Chao. Tenango Chalak Chizi and the Samba Tana, Ko Yochak, Ko Yochak, Ko Yochak, Matan Shadanov, the Standard Shadanov. Jews are in the Jews stand was a chap. Jews are in the Jews stand was can be set. South Tesana, Jew can of the Tesana, Toamecha, Razukan of the Tesana, success of Tesana, Toamechalsa, Tosambatene, Spinny Butchers, the Jika, Lola Chapa, Dragula Chapa, Tene, also with a Yamiski world, and Mujiski world, and to look more to zoom in also around.
I'd like to ask you a question. You are the person who asked the question. Which came first, you, the questioner, or the question that you asked? So, did the questioner exist first, or the question existed first? Is it has the question come up because there is a questioner, or? So he answers that the questioner exists first, and then he asked. If there's not a question, but His Holiness says if there was no question, then you couldn't have become a questioner. Because without an action, you cannot talk about an actor. So before the question, then how will you know that you are the questioner? How will we know that you are the questioner? So what would you ask? What would you have asked if there was no question? So because some thought that has come up in my mind, then the question came up. The questioner happened. So again, the same analysis. Because there is someone who could have that conception or thought, there was the thought. Not conceiving the three spheres. To have this kind of understanding is very important and very good, because usually when we have some thought, there's always an appearance of things having some independent or true existence in themselves. So that appearance of true existence in things that happen to us is overcome completely when someone has reached Buddhahood, and at that stage, so I asked Gen Yima once that after having overcome the obscuration to knowledge, once one becomes a Buddha, how does a Buddha see the different things? Because there is no appearance of true existence of the objects in the Buddha's mind. And then the Gen Yima's answer was that Gen Yima's answer was, this is something that only the Buddhas can answer, can know. Your Holiness rejects the existence of Mount Meru. Do you say that really, the Mount Meru did not exist right from the beginning, or do you say because modern science says that there's no, that cannot find the, would you say that there's no elephant in front of me? If yes, then how do you prove that there is no elephant? So would you say that if there was an elephant here in front of me, it should be perceptible to our eyes, and because it's not perceptible here, we cannot. There is no elephant. He's contradicting, trying to contradict His Holiness's position, finding inconsistency. Maybe there was a Mount Meru in the past, but it gradually went out of existence like dinosaurs. Then His Holiness says, in that case, we should be able to find some remnants of Mount Meru. Where is that? And in 1960, when America first sent the Apollo rocket to, and then some Americans landed on the moon. Some pictures came out in the media, and I showed the picture of the American person on the moon to Geshe Rabdinla. And Geshe Rabdinla said, "Oh, this cannot be the moon. Perhaps some part of Mount Meru. The Americans may have reached some parts." And so we need to really, of course, be critical. That's important. Whether Mount Meru did exist or not really makes no difference. So when we reject Mount Meru, of course, the problem here is we have difficulty holding on to the position how the realm of 33, where it is, and then also the four guardians, kings of the universe in the four directions. It doesn't really matter if we reject the Mount Meru and the four guardians and so forth. And also, if the Mount Meru does not exist, is not there, then we cannot also have the what are those called? The demigods cannot exist, which means demigods do not have to fight with the gods, and that's a good thing, isn't it? So even though Mount Meru may not exist, still we can talk about the abbot of the Tushita abbot of Maitreya, where he gives the teachings and so forth.
chimna de nanguru chimna khane yombe shiti nangu mamu che menang no so da kana ti kaza muzu tumu gi da tong pya ba ma ro chimna de na tumu ro chimna de.
So how about the shadow of Mount Meru, which is said to be cast on us, and that's why we have night time. So in Ganden Tshitsur Rinpoche is saying that even if Mount Meru existed, it's not necessary that it should be perceptible to our eyes. So even if it existed, it's not perceptible to our eyes, just like the hell realms, which are not perceptible to us, but they exist. In that case, if Mount Meru existed but not perceptible to us, how about the northern continent called Kuru? It is said that the people there lived 1,000 years, but if we were to locate Kuru, this northern continent, according to the traditional cosmology, it should be some America, and people in America do not live 1,000 years. So if we actually dig the earth and according to the certain according to Abhidhammakosha, it gives certain measurements and below which is said to be hell realm. And if we actually dig into the earth from Bodh Gaya, and we will reach America. So we would have to say that America is that kind of hell realm. So these go against our direct perception. So Tsongkhapa says that someone who holds on to some position which is contrary to reason is not a reliable or authoritative person. So in that case, how can we go against? If we should not go against reason, how can we go against our direct perception? So, in short, His Holiness says that whether we believe the existence of Mount Meru or not, the traditional cosmology or not, doesn't really matter, because the teachings of the Four Noble Truths and the 37 factors of enlightenment and so forth cannot be contradicted by any reason and empirical experiences. And so, regarding the understanding of emptiness also, regarding myself, I can say that I have some experience of emptiness, the view of emptiness, and also some form of experience of bodhicitta. So these are real experiences. So I don't have the single-pointed concentration, but if I am able to build that of the single-pointed concentration, I could say that gradually I would be able to attain the path of preparation. And then once you reach the path of preparation, you can also aspire to reach the path of seeing and so forth. So if, as it says in the Heart Sutra, that mantra says gate gate, which shows the path of accumulation and path of preparation and so forth. If I have single-pointed concentration, I would be able to reach the path of preparation. the second referred by the second Gati in the mantra. So whether Mount Meru existed or not doesn't really matter to me, because the teachings on the two truths and the Four Noble Truths and so forth really accord with reality. So even if Indra, the god Indra's abode, goes out of existence because of the rejection of Mount Meru, it doesn't really matter. So it is sometimes said that when some demigods throw stones and boulders at their gods, like Indra, then Indra's elephant actually hits that rock, and then it goes into pieces, and that's why we have dust from the sky. It says these are all really foolish things that are said in our traditions. So above the ram of 33, which is said to be on Mount Meru, is a ram which is called Tabdel, which means free from conflict, which is because of not having any conflict with the demigods. Therefore, that ram is named so. So above this ram, which is free from conflict, is above the Mount Meru, and so from that ram onwards, I mean, we can still say the other rams alike, and then also the god or Tushita heaven and so forth could also exist. When Rinpoche was alive, one day, of course, sometimes when I refer my experiences to him, relate my experiences to him, so with regard to Bodhicitta, Trijang Rinpoche was a really great master, and especially that of the exchange of self and others. And then with regard to emptiness, Ling Rinpoche was really great. And so in experience, I related one experience of emptiness to him. And he told me that soon you will be a space yogi. So I'm also eager to reach that kind of a goal. So if I'm not careful, I may commit the grave lie. So this is a nun. In Buddhism, we talk about Garepo. So in Buddhism, we say that there is no difference in caste system. We do not, there's no discrimination in caste. And during the ordination, there is a question that is asked to the candidates. So there are these different questions that are asked, and the nun was saying there is a question where it's asked to the candidates: are you not child of a blacksmith? His Holiness says he has not seen this. So one of the disciples of the Buddha was Upali. So Upali was from social status where of haircut, barber. And so the Buddha said that even him who comes from a barber's family must be respected by the king. And so in this tradition of the Buddha, not the caste, but the education and the knowledge and wisdom of the people are more important. And the practice of the Dharma. So when I was in Beijing for about 5 or 6 months in between 1954 and 55, so Mao Zedong I met many times. He was a really revolutionary person, so a wonderful person. So I began to have this sense of, when considering him as my father, and he was regarding me as his son. And one time, with regard to the Buddha, Mao told me that Buddha Shakyamuni at that time was again opposed this caste system in India. So he was a great revolutionary, Mao Zedong said. And therefore, in Buddhism, there is no talk of caste.
죽을 수 없을 때는 거기서나 산소 대소될 때는 소가라 자식 마음 세동 거랑 때나 revolutionary ni mata poji jura con calma mi trapoji no soara tene quando la questo è jura sa jara la ma sambi chonda da spede tous pola jejusi tene speravo jeju toda speravo no poji che sambi chonda da spede che tena jeju cercano nesta ni scandalo che tene chorso and dubasto and jikamusi ewa mezate tola mana mogul mane shukshan da kya soara tene sangi chonda da si kona soina ma tene jikam rusi spera mate shada kani tene chubushi tene gyalong da kya so sina ko apa nyawar ko da kan me kya so tene japo jawari jape tene papa nyawar ko kabo tene da chiga so shada kani te jakoti mamo gyalong gyo testing na come tene saba goto ga cha ma fa izuga sambatana japon japetene ajo shada kan jigna na jara de na din chona la pa paran se na no te sangyasi chona din chote ko jamu de so do na nyampo kwe tene azuga kampa tene sangyas aji jape utu cha so to so ba san na pa sangyasi chona din chona jiktaman na metap so na
In India, there are some untouchables, and perhaps this comes from feudal system. So in feudal system, this may be due to some imprint from the past of feudal system, because in feudal system, the upper class, such as the landlords and so forth, consider that they have some right, and those of the serfs do not have any right, and therefore they actually put them to serfdom, like slavery. And then the religions also evolved within that kind of social system. And because of that, there was the French Revolution, toppling the king's rule, and then during the Bolshevik Revolution, the Russians toppled the power or the rule of the Tsars. So I usually say that people who were against religion, I mean so-called, they were against religion, were not really against religion as such, because religion teaches love, compassion, and so forth, and so would be against these. And so they were against the institutions and of religion, religious institutions, and not so much against religion as such. And so there was, because of that, and they were seen also as they were against the institutions which were supporting the religious institutions. The kings and so forth were doing that.
But the institution of religion, unfortunately, become exploited and supporting feudal system. So it is really reasonable against that kind of religious institution. Right.
Therefore, regarding the caste system, it has some connection with slavery or serfdom, and which in turn is related to serfdom or feudal system. So I'm trying my best in India, meeting with spiritual leaders of India, and tell them that this caste system must be eliminated, and this must be led by the religious leaders themselves.
French Revolution, Revolution, Russia, French colonialism, che un certo ci sono che non è un po' per usare da non te catene e ci va dopo l'ello tanzaniano speravo io che faccia jing faccia jing ma poi era certo jing che io qua bene con te una tutto perciò te una forse te tutto la tanzania e ne ritornando tutto giocane no sono sana tele French Revolution na in yalba chango ni chetena chukogula o te teula tene against te teula tene mogol tene revolution changsa tolo nyampo o tene nyampo tene religious institution tene gonpa christian gonpa chapa teula norma po chapa teula agin girta so tena to ko a chigang tene russian girta so e choda mogol so se gyurson kya te chod muzna inne chod da mogol na yong yen cham cham chod muzna bu chamba da hinje ma pas chamba da hinje sui mogol cham ma no tane butik chi yen da kwa chamba chona chamba bu kwa demo sorano kwa mogol cham na no somba sana odi so se tene religious institution gune against the family kyakala and regulation shanke son kelaso sombasan ten samir saabo ketena chupodan yagachana landlord tamdese zamindar tevuni sfera de jante tezukshiga gyurson klasa tene sunduna tene suga monshe kane gyara tene sadhu mampo yoso tene te sadhu guna sunduni jatampe onadeso gyara tene jigna pa antache baguna machiga son ketena te tene azuku ketena shikushano te omekan chogoshano te yezano tene I goa dukane sadhu tan lama gune tene goti chos te o de te jiktomane te go mekan chogosha khatane no mo te skuneli kona te jatabu suanza deso.
Yeah. You see, genuine communist, how can against also the compassion? Very motivation of Karl Marxism is very much concerned about working class people's right. Too much exploitation at that time. So Karl Marx, you see, create certain sort of concept. Now the real ruling of industrialized nation is working class people, not those business or royal family like that. So therefore, and then he very much emphasizes equal distribution in the economy field. That is the basis of socialism. Wonderful. So I myself, as a Buddhist monk, practitioner of Bodhicitta, as far as socio-economic theory is concerned, I am Marxist. At the same time, I totally against Leninism. Leninism very much concerned about totalitarian power. That's actually against original Marxism. Yeah. So like that,
So in Buddhism, there is no discrimination against caste. Nobody is discriminated on the basis of caste. So on the basis of nobody is discriminated on the basis of wealth, whether they are poor or rich or poor. So we talk about well-being of all sentient beings, don't we? We don't say, and may those who are near to me have happiness. And those who have the same kind of thinking like me have happiness. So this is not how we pray. So we pray for all sentient beings to have happiness, sentient beings who are as limitless as the expanse of space. So we have such courage. So if you meet with someone who happens to be, or who happens to claim that they are a practitioner of Buddhism, but they then still talk about casteism, then caste system, when you should actually argue against that person, that Buddha did not actually consider caste system as important. I rejected the caste system. So Lenin's control of power happened under this circumstance.
So therefore, Lenin's mind very much influenced by the cause of the wartime mentality, secrecy, distrust, ruthless suppression. Wartime, such things, some relevant. So that, unfortunately, wartime, certain sort of, also the habit or certain sort of also the practice become part of the communism. That's very unfortunate.
Very good afternoon, His Holiness. I have one question. So in biological science, there is one concept called evolution, which says that we humans have evolved from animals, small animals like bacteria and fish. We have evolved from those animals. So I want to know, in Buddhism, is there any equivalent concept which describe how human beings came into existence? Thank you.
As I said this morning, also, according to Abhidhamma Karika, there's mention of human beings coming to existence from the gods, originating from gods, and then coming on this earth, and later the human beings enjoying some kind of a nectar that were formed on this crust of the earth, and then the lower openings emerging and so forth. Maybe these are difficult to hold on to. But scientifically, for example, when some bones were found in Tibet, they were found to be 20,000 or 30,000 years old, which means these are bones of people who lived in Stone Age era. And recently some Chinese scientists also found some skeletons, archaeological findings. So according to their research, they have said that these bones in that they found in Tibet were 30 to 40,000 years. So we need to have objective study of these further. It's important. So Afghanistan, Uyghur, and Xinjiang, maybe the earliest civilization. So usually it is said that humans originated in Africa, and then two strands of the human species formed. One went towards Europe and then other Asia. And so they are doing objective research objectively, and then they are able to find out how old the things, ecological things they find under the ground are. Carbon dating. So evolutionary theory that scientists explain has reason and there's evidence to it. So on the other hand, the scriptures mentioning human beings having lived 40,000 years and so forth, we don't have any evidence to this. We can only say, oh, these are said in the scriptures, and that's not really going to work. The most important thing is to have a good understanding of the two truths and emptiness, and then so when it comes to the ultimate teaching of emptiness, if we have to interpret the teaching of the Buddha when they cannot be taken literally, then the other teachings regarding the varieties of things, maybe we can say it doesn't really matter if we have to interpret them as well.
Evolutionary theories
Is this your relay station?
Teachers, you have one question. Then only two questions. Now last two questions. One male, one female.
in
Yeah.
In this universe,
cordless kan
there are so many microorganisms which we cannot see with our naked eyes. According to the Buddhist view, there are many realms like Yidak, Nyalva. Is these are really our realms? Please explain.
So amongst the organisms, there are many which we can see with our own eyes, birds and other animals in the wild and so forth. So similarly, there are other organisms which we cannot see, such as gods, demigods, hungry ghosts. Animals, of course, we can see many of them, and then there seems to be many others whom we cannot see. Animals. So we talk about spirits, protectors, local gods, and so forth. They are not perceptible to us with our naked eyes, but we can have experience of them. I mean, their indications through dreams and so forth. I had a friend who was not a believer. He asked me that your thinking is scientific, but how about believing in the protector, Dharma protectors, and having discussions with them, asking questions and so forth? How do you explain that? So of course we say that there are 6 different types of beings, or 6 realms of existence, and everything that exists does not necessarily have to be perceived by us as such. So there was one Chinese military official whom I asked a question like, perhaps it was about past and future, and I asked him why does past and future lives exist, and he says they are not perceptible to our eyes. And then I contradicted his position by saying that if something exists, is it necessary that you should see it? And he said no. So I used the logic that was used in Pramanavartika. So just because we are not able to perceive them doesn't mean that they don't exist. But we can actually infer their existence through different means. Like we can have some indication of the existence of other spirits and so forth. And then I do a lot of divination by saying the mantra of Ye Dharma and so forth. So in most of the important cases, I have done this kind of divination, and they have actually come to be true. And so it's something mysterious, but we cannot rule them out. And so the 6 realms of existence of beings, including those of the gods, demigods, Gandharvas, and so forth, could exist. And so within these realms of gods and demigods and so forth, there are those who are good and those who are bad. And so one of the persons asked about the verse from this 37 practices of bodhisattvas. So the 37 practices also say that themselves bound in samsara, how can they help us for attaining liberation? And so there are these spirits, local deities, local spirits and so forth, but they are not objects of our refuge as such, but people sometimes consider them to be too important. That should not be done. So someone who has direct realization of emptiness is an object of refuge. And so other than that, if you take refuge in beings who are like the spirits, local gods and so forth, it's wrong according to Buddhist practice. But they, by having said that, we do not rule out the existence of these gods and local spirits, local spirit landlords and so forth.
Thank you for giving this opportunity to for all of us. Rinpoche, I want to ask, if I'm not mistaken, once in Dharamsala, in your teaching you said that to understand emptiness, we have to understand dependent origination, that is dependent on causality, dependent on paths, and dependent on designation. But if we say emptiness is equal to dependent origination, then it is not. So I'm confused. I asked so many people, but I'm not satisfied with the answer.
Kasa?
Stombatang standing ni te chikpare bhezo za titi son.
Then really, then there is such one. That there are many
So with regard to dependent origination, there is the understanding of dependent origination in terms of causality, dependence on causality, which is accepted by all the followers of Buddhism. And then there is dependence in terms of dependence of whole on its parts. For example, we can talk about a vase. A vase exists on the basis of its parts, in dependence on its parts, and accordingly we designate a vase in dependence on its parts. So this is the second level of understanding dependence. So law of causality, dependence of law of causality, and dependence of a whole on its parts. And then those Madhyamakas, who reject any objective existence, even in conventional terms, they say that nothing can be found objectively when you actually analyze and try to search for their identity. Like quantum physics says, there is no objective existence. Although things cannot be found when we put them under the lens of scrutiny and analysis, that doesn't mean they don't exist as such. So at the end of the Lekshen Yingpo by Je Rinpoche, So if things were to have any objective existence, then Je Rinpoche says in his Tangye Lekshen Yingpo that the realizations of an Arya being would be a destroyer of objects. And also, if the things were to have any objective existence, then the conventional existence can actually withstand reason and critical analysis. And then in his Gongpa Rapsel, he says that things can exist either one way or the other, which means either as from their own side or by way of designation. And since things cannot stand the test of reasoning and therefore cannot have their existence from their own side, there's no other alternative but to accept that they exist by way of designation. And so, and then in the commentary on Mula Madhyamaka Karika, Je Rinpoche says things do not exist in any way else but designation. Therefore, one should try to drive one's mind towards it. In the Madhyamaka Avatara, there is a sevenfold analysis of things, or like a chariot. When you analyze a chariot from the sevenfold reasoning, and there cannot be anything that you can pinpoint as being a chariot, that you can actually identify as a chariot, yet the chariot exists by way of designation based on its parts. And so this is really a conclusive kind of a reasoning to say that things do not have any inherent independent existence, but are designated. So I'm very glad to have met you, and your questions were really crucial and meaningful questions. And thank you. You should further, while doing your studies, receiving education of your different subjects, it would be very good for you to study the classical text, the classic texts of the Indian masters. For the Muslims also, I'd like to say that reason, epistemology and logic is something that you can actually learn. It's a common subject. And so for this study of philosophy and logic, Tibetan language is the best language. For over 1,000 years, we have used this language to demonstrate the truth of the teaching, and with reference to the basis, the path, and the result. So no other language is able to explain precisely the teaching. In terms of the basis and path and the result. So Buddhist Tibetan language is the best. So of course you as Ladakis should be able to read Tibetan while you have your own dialect, using your own dialect. So in other languages, it's very difficult to explain the teaching precisely of the Buddha precisely. And the Sanskrit used to be the language which was used in the past, but today it's like a dead language. So therefore, pay more attention to Tibetan. Thank you.
원래 때네 이 죽비가 닥터 징이식스켰등이자
규제 스콘도니 때고 송아다라 tani kyuje tiwa bo chetena ma tiwa tonta kane tiwa ti sora skondon ma thuk thante tha sora han tani stigma nang kyujara tani i jungla nastak choste kanjus tanjurina yotkane tonta kun shesha se thapse chogosha dasi lobjung bo nang nyambo ma khachane no so tani daksi ngata nang pe chosi Mosma sped chiga buketena podigina yotkak mene janma gunena tene tal chol bajik ma galajik metka so sig dansa man oso soma sangata las pa thu guni podik potene ngata las se dadan ka tene jango shaspo ma kharcha nin so ra podiga inchi minchi tene ngata podik po jon so ra podik pe taste tene ngata na pe shos ngoma bo shes tup sa no mene janma skadina to shes tup chan metka mal hanma kertena sanskirina yotkak pa sanskrit po daksa metkan jurte no so tontang atan las pa las kondoni podik por jet maljeda podik por juntu te jango shas po matara piang panto jikte ne piang panto yang chan no so
저희 죽사자주 된다사 실라노 나와서 제노 대비아 나는 뭐 정말 인마리사 비만 상망 또 마리사 텔레콤 이자타오 메트카메트 냔테스가자 테리토리 스나토 마탄 단죽스불라자 치즈노투 양 테스티나 테스 투제션도 파파션라즈기 왕 양 테스티나 드링이 순서스라글스포 양 테스티나
车摇都管得着。